Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra. Today, I want to highlight for you an ABC News article titled something like, "The Rain in Florida is of Biblical Proportions." This was an April 13th of 2023 article. Other articles refer to this torrential rain in Florida as historically unprecedented.
Historic amounts of rainfall have caused what one city's mayor describes as the most severe flooding he's ever seen.
Yet, as usual, I saw no mention of climate change. And many of you have already heard my quick take on how this is connected to climate change, the mechanisms driving it. But in this one, I'm also going to give a biblical analysis. Now, you could argue that by mentioning biblical proportions and leaving out climate change, you're almost encouraging a false narrative or something deceptive. But here, I'm going to argue that actually the biblical analysis and the scientific analysis might go hand in hand. Well, our first and really only clue I saw in that ABC article was a link to another article about the heat hitting parts of the Northeast and Midwest, I believe, right now. And that's just it. It's the heat. I've shown you before from NASA, now on the climate change mechanisms, that our Earth is roughly 2 Fahrenheit degrees hotter since the beginning of the era of fossil fuel burning or the Industrial Revolution. Hot and heating because of all those heat-trapping greenhouse gases being put out there. But I like to say this is set in motion by fossil fuels because I showed you in my other video on feedback loops where I was studying PBS that there are these feedback loops kicking in where global warming or heating or climate change is now taking on a life of its own. Should have been addressed decades ago. Well, from Scientific American and other sources, and a show I did covering vapor storms, they explain how the hotter atmosphere holds on to more moisture more greedily, and the hotter oceans just gives up more moisture into that atmosphere, fueling storms. Or fueling prolonged dry spells as well, contrarily. So when it rains, it pours. And indeed, there's stats showing that extreme precipitation, extreme rainfalls, extreme snowfalls, where there is still snow, are on the rise and have been rising. Flood to drought type of world we've created. We in quotes. I've been speaking out about this my whole lifetime. And worse, don't you love it how the media seems to always portray these extreme events as like a local thing in Florida. Hey, I did a video last summer on Pakistan, like a third of the country underwater. Before that, I've done floods rampaging in Germany. All these have done floods in Yellowstone and in the West, like Nevada, all kinds of places. Flood, China. It's those same mechanisms driving these extreme rainfalls, crop failures, heat waves. Last summer, much of Europe, China, Asia, America under extreme heat. But how much of that media, with I believe their ties to those fossil fuel petrochemical industries, ever bother to tie it back? Even the ones that mention it, it's in the background. And then you got the ones like Fox who still deny it, or still host deniers on occasion, as far as I'm aware. Well, let's come back to that biblical analysis. The Pope, in his book Laudato Si', pointed out how God brought the flood as punishment for man's violence. And Laudato Si' was the Pope's work on climate change, warning us about climate change. And there the Pope was citing Genesis. Well, and think about it, it's kind of common sense, isn't it? All these wars, how many of them are about oil, resources? George W. Bush mocked Al Gore for wanting to address climate change, which would have meant scaling back on fossil fuels, and instead invaded Iraq, an oil-rich country. He walked away from that Kyoto Climate Accord. And how much of the public supported it? Violence. The Pope cited disregard for Sabbath laws, meaning just rest, stop doing stuff, stop being so busy, stop just burning fossil fuels constantly. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. Amazingly, Pope Francis cited really underreported part of the Bible that we're supposed to be taking a Sabbath, a sabbatical once every 7 years for a year, where the Bible says to let the land rest. A whole year off. Who's promoting that one? What churches are promoting, hey, people, we got to stop and take a year off? What would that do to commerce? What would that do to the economy? Well, that's where I get into more biblical analysis. Now I'm on my own with it, not getting this from Laudato Si'. But we think about those economic interests where even like the churches don't seem to want to criticize them, and our whole media is ignoring them. In Matthew 4:8, that's where Jesus was tempted by the devil, and the devil was offering or showing Jesus all the riches and kingdoms in the world that could be his. Well, Jesus turned down that deal from the devil. Matthew 6:24, I believe, says you can't serve two masters, both God and money. In Mark 10:17 through 31, there was the story of where Jesus spoke to the rich man who said, "What else do I have to do to get into the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus said, "You know what? You got to give all your money away to the poor and follow me." The rich man walked away despondent. He didn't want to do that. When we see all these Christian media outlets ignoring this, the people championing Christian values, and I'm not calling them hypocrites here because, we're all hypocrites. Everybody's ignoring this stuff, okay? The liberals are ignoring it too, largely, not entirely though, but largely. There's that warning in Matthew 7:15 to beware the false prophets. Well, here we come down to I've shared with you before that the Republican Party gets the lion's share of the fossil fuel funding. That's coming from Open Secrets. And I shared with you in numerous videos. You look at the League of Conservation Voters and you compare Republican and Democratic scorecards on the environment. It's way out of line. Republicans getting miserable scores, Democrats getting much better. Look, both parties are controlled by these big industries, but when it comes to influence from the environmental movement, which is the main movement, one of the main movements really challenging dominant industry, the true environmental movement, not greenwashing and people claiming to be green like the nuclear power industry trying to wrap itself in a green cloak. They're the ones really challenging that money interest in society, which it seems to me like the Bible's telling you to do. So in conclusion, I don't think it's an either or thing. Is it science? Is it climate change burning our planet down, set in motion by the excessive burning of fossil fuels? Or is it failure to listen to God's will, failure to heed the godly path? To me, I argue they're the same. And I hope you found that argument interesting, helpful, useful. And if you did, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel. And even if you didn't subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. Constructive criticism appreciated. Insults, put downs, not so much. And as always, until next time, and thank you to my two patrons of Patreon, Bella Grissi and Environmental Coffee House. And as always, until next time, peace be with you.